Well, good morning and good afternoon, as the case might be, and welcome or welcome back to our series entitled Conversations with Tech Leaders, Shaping the Future of Canada. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte, and I have had the pleasure of being your host of this series for now coming year and a half. And for those of you who have been on this ride, on this journey along with us, thank you very much for your continued patronage and for your continued support and interest. I also wanted to thank the Canadian CIO Strategy Council for co-sponsoring this series with Deloitte. Over the next 45 minutes, we are going to have a conversation with another top-tier, highly respected Canadian technology executive, of which about first half an hour, she and I are going to have a chat, but we made sure that we have enough time for your questions and answers. So please feel free to submit any questions you might have using the Q&A function of this Zoom platform. It is a real pleasure and delight to welcome Jessie Adcock to this conversation. Jessie and I go way back. We met when Jessie was the inaugural Chief Digital Officer at the City of Vancouver a number of years back. So I'm really thrilled, Jessie, and grateful to you to give us this time, both to me and the audience who is here to listen to our conversation. I have a couple of questions that I prepared. The first question I often start with is to ask our guests to tell us their story, how you navigated your life and how you navigated your career to now be at the spot where you're at. So Jessie, again, thank you very much. Welcome, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to see you again. And yes, we go way back, and it's always been such a positive experience. So I'm really happy to be able to do this with you today. So I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
My career has been, I would say, the quintessential series of progressive moves, really. I mean, I started my career in technology as a customer service representative for a small satellite company that had secured the exclusive rights to the Iridium satellite in Canada for a couple of years. And they were building out a little call center in Coquitlam, BC at the time. And they needed somebody who was fluent in French, and I was in French immersion. And so I got this job, but I didn't know very much about technology at all. It was the early days of the internet. And that was the beginning of what was a huge course correct in my trajectory. At that stage, I had no inclination that technology was an option as a career. And it was a fluke, really, that I ended up in that position. And that led to what became a career in technology, now almost going on, almost 30 years. So started as a customer service representative, and then went to work for our billing system vendor, and worked there first as a receptionist and then as a tester. And then from testing, I moved into quality control and configuration management. From there, I moved into project management. And again, it's just been step up as we go. And from project management into product into strategy into, so I got to play every role on the team until eventually there was enough there to be able to provide, pretty good, sound strategic oversight across the spectrum. Along the way, I've moved sectors a few times. So I often define my career in terms of chapters. The first one was in telecommunications, and learned a lot at that point about the backbone of our global internet, our global telecommunications system, how in those days, we were figuring out, things like how to take credit cards online and how to do B2B integration, how to talk to banks, how to send files back and forth. Those were the early days. And so worked, globally. I worked in Australia for a couple of years. I worked in the US, in Europe, South Africa, Canada, and then eventually moved into banking. So I transitioned from telecommunications into the next chapter, which was banking. And I worked for HSBC for just under 10 years. And the chapter there was taking now this new infrastructure and completely revamping the business model. So when I started with HSBC, they were very much bricks and mortar. And then, by the time I had left, they were very much a digital bank. And I had the, again, opportunity to participate in hundreds of projects over the course of that tenure that allowed me to sort of understand how users interact with digital channels and how important it is to sort of be very user-centric in the design of services and products. And so that led me to kind of my next chapter, which was a public sector for the first time. And I moved into a role at the City of Vancouver. I spent about 8 years there, first as their Chief Digital Officer, then as their Chief Information Officer, led a multi-year transformation in government. That was a really, really eye-opening experience. There is no setting more operational than a city. I tell people all the time, if you really, really want to feel operations, you should work in a city where nothing ever sleeps, right? Like your infrastructure is ongoing all the time. And that was an incredible experience. And then I moved back into private sector as the VP of Digital Finning. And now I am taking a year to freelance actually and do some of my own things as a treat to myself, to allow myself a little bit of a mental break from what has basically been 2.5 decades of nonstop.
Yeah. What a fascinating journey. And also I can tell a dog lover, right?
Most of the time.
What a fascinating
Yes,
journey.
great timing.
Yeah. What a fascinating journey. So it's actually, you just gave us a whirlwind tour of different industries, different geographies. When you reflect back, and let's not go back all the way. Let's just maybe go back to the last couple of roles. Finning, of course, one of the world's largest manufacturer prior to that, City of Vancouver. Not only one of the most beautiful cities in the world, but very intense environment. What would you say the biggest lessons you've taken away? What might be some sort of strategic cool things you've done, some challenges you faced, and some lessons you've taken?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some lessons both on the sort of business side and on the people side, right? Mm-hmm. I think that we have been living for the last couple of decades in an era marked by a lot of transition and change, both like society as we sort of adapt to the change, but also industry, and governments are not immune to that. And I think one of my biggest takeaways has been the importance of communication and teamwork in these environments, whether it's as a member of society or whether it's as a leader or an employee in an organization. Change is navigated through really, really clear, open, transparent communication. And so, transformation projects or sort of adjusting to change on the home front is really about how we feel, how we perceive things, how we see ourselves in the change. And people often say, like, what's the secret to transformation? Because I have had quite a bit of success with a number of projects in terms of execution on vision. And I always say, well, it's technology second, it's hearts and minds first. And so that's really one of my takeaways is the importance of sort of maintaining a human element to even what are the most complex projects. I think one of the other key takeaways is the enormity of how much integration there is. when we started off in the 90s, your systems didn't really integrate too much. Now, my gosh, there's so much integration at every step of the way, and so much technology to stitch together to deliver services in the kind of time frame and cadence people want. And integration and planning integration has become, to me, like the game changer between those who really, really can be elevated at the delivery of services versus not. And so folks who don't have that kind of integration and large systems thinking mindset, I feel like they're constantly in this cycle of improvement, as opposed to those who sort of are mindful of an end game and an evolving kind of goal line, and are always moving towards not only just like a short-term opportunity, but always have like the long-term in mind as well.
I'm just taking some notes here because this is gold stuff. So people communication, of course, key to the actual change.
Yeah.
And integrations and system thinking key to a successful tech leader who I guess retains a seat at the table. Right?
Yeah, and sustainable ROI, right? So the sustainability of investments that we make into technology. I strongly believe that needs to be now master planned. It is overwhelming. I don't know how many, I'm sure, I don't know a single person who isn't overwhelmed by the number of passwords they have to keep or the amount of things they have to keep track of. It's getting pretty intense for users and service providers alike, I think, right? So.
Yeah. So this is excellent. Thank you for this. You mentioned that you are taking now sort of a strategically at 1 year to sort of decompress after 25 years of climbing the stairs.
Yeah.
Right? And I know, of course, how important wellness and self-care is for all of us and for you. I would love to sort of get your thoughts on how you're approaching it. What are your thoughts on wellness and self-care?
I appreciate that question. Thank you so much for it. I think it's really important. A lot of technology leaders, and I know from my cohort of colleagues that I keep in touch with, you're 24/7 on all the time. And there's not a lot of time to decompress and think in that, because you're constantly responsible for keeping the lights on. You're responsible for ensuring that all of your business leaders have the right technology infrastructure to deliver on business goals. You want to make sure that your people are taken care of. You want to make sure also that you're keeping abreast of like developments, and so you're keeping fresh. And so being a technology executive is just I don't know any other way to characterize it other than a constant hustle, right? You're just going all the time. And I think, especially with the taxation of the pandemic on our personal lives, I think one of the key elements of moving forward and maintaining the ability to stay fresh, to stay productive, is you need to take breaks. And you need to take care of yourself so that you can continue to be a good leader. And what I found was that, I was scared to vocalize that, because I was trained to believe that you don't step off the treadmill. Especially if you think about the context of having started off as, a receptionist and moving my way up into the CIO role with a non-tech background and as a woman of color. The adversity in that ascension has been significant. And to say, I want to take a break because I think I just deserve one, and because I would like to go for walks, and because I would like to enjoy, what is the last year or two before my daughter goes off to university, and I would like some time to spend with family. Why should that be so wrong? And that was the thought process that kind of led to, well, why not? And let's talk about the fact that this is intentional and deliberate, thoughtful, and I think an investment in my own long game, right? Otherwise I'll burn out and fizzle. And, I wanted to sort of speak about it openly too, because it's interesting. Everyone I've told the story to and just said, it was so scary to take the plunge and say I'm taking a break, but now that I've put it out there, people are like, oh gosh, yeah, I would like to take a break, and that's great, and thank you for talking about it. So I like to take every opportunity I can to mention it.
Yeah, that's excellent. So now of course, many of the people contemplate doing some organization actually or have sabbatical as part of their programs, right? I completely feel with, not for, but with technology executives that I work with. It is a hustle, and it's nonstop. Any advice on how to do more self-care and wellness for those who don't feel that they can take a year off, right? For whatever reasons.
Yeah.
Is there any words of advice or encouragement for those who actually are in role, don't think they can take a year or two off or 6 months off? How do you do that while working?
Well, I think making time is probably number one, and having, according to your value structure, having priorities in play that remind you of what are the other important things in your life. And I think family, health, wellness, mental capacity are those types of things. And so blocking off time, I think, is really important, whether it's during the day or whether it's on the weekends and evenings, but having some commitment to preserving time for yourself, because I think that's the biggest thing that happens with technology executives, is that the day is unpredictable. Like, you can't, as a tech exec, start the day with a plan. 99% of the time, you're not going to that plan that day, right? You could have an outage, you could have something go sideways on a project, you could have an emerging priority come up. There's just so much that gets thrown at you during the day. So having some discipline around time, I think, is very important. And also the self-awareness to know when it's time to step away, take a walk, take a minute, take a breath, and I think lots of people are very, very good at that. But some of us, we do forget because we are in it all the time.
Yeah. So for some people, it might be courage to do it, and for the others, it might be they just forget to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's some people, this one always gets me. There's people who forget to eat. I never forget to eat. Yeah. I always remember to eat, but there are people who forget to eat, like that's the other thing, is if you're one of those folks, like, that forget to eat, like, you need to have even that built in. Like, that's a basic of life.
Yeah.
I think also time to pursue passion, important, like figuring out what it is that gives you joy. One of the things, this is going to sound so cliche, but one of the first things I did with I've only been off for a few weeks. I haven't been off that long yet, but one of the first things I did was register for tennis lessons. So I took the time off right away, because it's something I've wanted to do my whole life. And, I wanted to block that off before this time gets consumed by other things. I wanted to give myself the first block of time.
Very good. That's very good. Excellent. So Jessie, you obviously had a leadership roles in one of the most complex and biggest organizations in British Columbia, with City of Vancouver, and then with Finning. You walked the walk from, you say you started really in sort of a tech support and went all the way to the CIO and Chief Technology Officer in a complex organization over the past 25 years. What have you observed? How is the role of a technology executive changing? And what do you think is going to be the future for the role of a tech executive? Like, how is the role changing, and where do you think is the role going?
Well, the role trajectory clearly has moved from commodity IT to strategic enabler, right? And so I think in the early days, it was really about IT operations, network, email, telephony, and then layer on the application development knowledge after that, then the skill set of data and analytics, and then the skill set of digital services. And now what we found is that the technology component has become the core of every business, right? We hear that all the time. There is no business that isn't a technology business. And it's become the core. And now with COVID, even more so entrenched as the core of every business. Whether you want to call it the cardiovascular system or the nervous system or whatever, it is essential. And so, I remember when I was the first public sector chief digital officer in Canada. And I remember at that time, there was a lot of, if you actually go back to like Gartner articles and Forrester articles around 2012, 2013, you'll see there's a lot of like, what's with the CDO? Is it all hype? What's happening to the role of the CIO versus the CDO? And I remember I did one keynote back then and I said, look, the title isn't so much important, but it's the skill set. And I know that my title might change. And actually I did this at a CIO conference, a keynote where I talked about this. And I said, the title may come and go, but the fact is that I'm layering on these skill sets that are becoming essential to understanding how business works. And that skill set will remain important to organizations, and the title may or may not change. And so what I've seen is in line with that kind of prediction, if you will, that I made a decade ago, is that you're seeing more and more CIOs move into CEO roles now, whereas it was once upon a time, didn't really happen, right? It was always the CFO or it was always the COO that succeeded the CEO. That is completely changing. I've just in the last couple of months seen 2 or 3 colleagues move into president or CEO roles. And that is, I think, a testament to the fact that technology has become the core of the business. And there is no business unit, whether it is a corporate service or it is a revenue producing line of business, that isn't dependent on that. And so you have to understand how to invest capital. You have to understand a multi-year plan. You have to understand how systems get stitched together, again, because of cost realities. And so that's where I think that if we continue to focus on the skill set versus the title, we will see folks just keep moving up because we need them to lead us.
That is actually like you're singing singing from the same songbook I'm singing. I'm seeing the same thing exactly. There's this dynamic. The role itself is feeling almost bipolar, where the organizations need from the same leader to be protective of the existing assets, risk adverse, deliver services, predictable cost, low risk, and at the same time, bring us innovation, transform us, drive us forward. And these are like contradictory things, right? So that is why I would call the CIO role to be the most challenging C-suite role in the whole at a table, because it includes these sometimes diametrically opposite expectations. But those who are focused on the left, I think, are at risk of the sustainable role. Those who are only focused on sort of keeping the lights on and delivering it in a cost-efficient manner. Those who are focusing on the right, who are actually immersed and understand the business, there is no better role to truly understand how the whole enterprise operates and works. And I agree, they are in best position to actually assume the role of the CEO. So this is.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like ultimately, not that, obviously it's in my own interest to be perceived that way, right? So that when I'm off my career break, I could get to keep moving up. But the interesting thing is that, especially with cybersecurity too, like a lot of the risk that organizations are exposed to, a lot of the business cases that we have to build, a lot of the strategies that we have to move forward requires a really extensive understanding of the end-to-end. And no one really understands the end-to-end of the organization better than the technology department, because they are touching everybody and they are serving internal and external customers. So they know where the risks are, they know where the opportunities are.
So now for those CIOs, let's call them CIOs or CITOs, or actually CITDOs, really, like those who are whole portfolio. For them to become top exec, president, or CEO, it's a different skill set than the skill set required to operate IT department efficiently, right?
Correct.
Can you comment on, from your experience, from your observations, those colleagues you mentioned that recently became presidents and CEOs, what are those unique attributes that you think are essential for that full realization?
It comes back to where we started the conversation at the top of the hour. It's about understanding people. It's about the ability to communicate. It's emotional intelligence, self-awareness.
Yeah.
The people that are moving into these roles are really, really understanding of where our society is at from a diversity perspective, from an accessibility standpoint, understand the importance of, because public and private is converging so much, right? The solution, especially with climate change. And the public agenda is becoming the private agenda in so many ways. If we think about ESG and existential threats, the pandemic, etc. And so again, like we think about these systems and the systems of systems. And so these leaders are folks who understand that. They understand the importance of network. They understand the importance of big picture, strategic thinking, how these pieces click together, both within the organization and outside the organization. And I think that's what we're seeing emerging as these leaders that are elevating out of IT.
Yeah. So the next thing I wanted to sort of touch on, and you were in the role to actually, you were very well connected in the Canadian public sector organizations across the country. What role do you think we as technology leaders have to advance Canada's role? First of all, Canada's economy and society, and then Canada's role on the global stage. What can we do differently or better? Where are we missing?
We have the ability to be global connectors, irrespective of which country we live in. Like the tech stack is not finite, but in the sense that the tech stack that we use in most organizations is almost like has the potential to be the cohesive fabric globally, right? The dialogue, the language is universal and global. And I think that IT leaders, if they were to decide globally that, they were going to pull on one string, you could have major momentum at mass scale if every CIO in the world bought into one thing, for example. And so that is potential that has never been really harnessed. What we see CIOs as economic buyers determining which of the tech stack is going to kind of lead or not, right? And so we see products and services gain momentum through adoption because we do sit on top a significant amount of capital that gets invested into the technology market. Yep. There are many organizations out there that are spending billions annually in their IT budgets. And so I think that there is room for some kind of global even coordination or Canadian coordination. Like that is the potential that we haven't tapped into yet. We're very much still focused on the strategic level, industry level. And I think, as we move into this new future, post-pandemic economic recovery, as well as, I think we'll see the role of ESG and DEI factoring more and more.
Yep.
So I think that collectively we can really, really effect global change and also economic change. Yep. Thus, through the collaboration, the potential that we have as like economic buyers and strategic leaders.
Yeah. So you have your most recent experiences in a private sector, previous experience with public sector. Can you maybe contrast how well do you feel you were connected into the community of Canadian tech executives when you were with Citi, and how well connected you felt like, is there a forum? Is there, like, to what degree is that fabric of Canadian tech leaders coming together, sharing learning, working closely together in existence, and you're taking advantage of this, or is it not?
That's an excellent question. I think it's a bit of a gap, right? I think what we have, it's like a imagine like multiple circles in a Venn diagram. There's different networks, and depending on your own personal self-startership or innate motivation, you participate in different circles. And so some folks have the energy to participate in a lot of circles, and some people don't have the energy to participate in any circles, and some fall in between. So depending on the number of circles that you participate in, i.e. networks, you become more connected, right? And so what I found was that there wasn't any kind of like obvious sort of show up here and you're going to be connected across from east to west in Canada. It was more so driven by instinct, and also like, if I spend my time doing X, am I getting something back in return? And if so, then yes, I'm going to keep putting my time there, because I'm achieving some kind of like personal benefit, some kind of organizational benefit, some kind of community benefit. And you know, like for example, you know, I took it upon myself to multiple times to lead and convene a meeting of municipal CIOs across the country, because there wasn't that forum. Like, you have forums for provincial CIOs and federal CIOs, but there isn't a forum really for municipal, nor are there budgets, right? And so you can't get like dedicated time. Now, I was lucky because I came into public sector from private, and so you inherit your connections, right? So you're private into public and then back into private.
Yeah.
And so I'm very fortunate to inherit those. But I think there isn't an obvious answer to that, right? You have to, it's part of that skill set. You have to build that network as you go.
And I agree, that is a gap, I think, because it's a gap. If
it's a gap. And you also have to nurture your network, right? And that takes energy. And so, not to like plug the break again, but after the pandemic, it has been very difficult to reintegrate and be social again. Like, you know, once upon a time, it was just part of the schedule, and you found time, and then pandemic happens, and then we're all in our homes for a couple of years, and now it's like, we'll go out again. What? I don't want to go out.
I agree. I agree. You're right. I mean, I've actually had many of these interviews with CIOs. You're actually the very first person that I'm interviewing who is currently in between jobs. And as you remember, you and I had a chat of, we do this now. I actually wanted to do this now because I think it is really important to highlight this as a very normal, natural, and welcoming move that technology leaders need to think of and do when the timing is right for them. So I am very supportive of what you are doing. I'm gonna
bags under my eyes agree. These were dark circles, honestly, like 2 months ago.
Yes. I'm going to jump into audience questions in a bit. I just want to ask you the last question that I had. It's about your reflect. We often have people listening into these conversations who are, you know, early in their career, or students who are contemplating a career in tech. Any sort of reflections or advice that you might have for them?
So I did a panel on Monday night called Let Her Lead. It was about empowering women and girls in civic engagement. And I'm going to pass on the advice that Senator Mobina Jaffer provided to the audience, because it was honestly like game-changing advice that even for me, I'd never really heard before. She said, anyone will give you 10 minutes. And if you ask anybody for 10 minutes, they will give you 10 minutes. So when you are navigating, you know, an hour is hard, a coffee is hard, meet me for lunch is hard, but 10 minutes is not hard. And so, you know, as people move forward, take the first step and don't be afraid to take a step. Because if you don't take the step, you'll never actually know what is in that direction. So take the step, and then never be afraid to ask somebody for 10 minutes of their time. And, even if they say no, they say no, but chances are, if you only ask for 10 minutes, you might get 10 minutes. And then she said that she had exercised that advice, and she had done it with one of the prime ministers, and that whenever she asked the prime minister for 10 minutes, she would only take 8, so that if she ever asked for 10 again, she would get another 10. So she took the 8 of the 10. So I'm going to pass that advice on, because on Monday, that the whole auditorium that we were in, you could feel the air kind of go out and go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to pass on Senator Jaffer's advice from Monday night.
That is excellent. Actually, that's the gold nugget number 2 I've taken now as a note. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. We
have to quote her on it though, because it was hers.
Sure, we're happy to. Let's go to a couple of sort of questions from the audience. So the question came, you mentioned climate change, you mentioned ESG a couple of times in our conversation. How do you factor in technology, and what do you think is the role of technology within an organization to help organization with setting and achieving those goals?
So I don't think you can decouple climate change and technology. So first of all, if we just take a very binary and mathematical viewpoint to it, we have to be able to baseline and benchmark our organization's emissions, right? And so we need to be able to track carbon, what we're doing in relation to our own emissions and footprint, et cetera, so that we can actively look to reduce that in any organization we're in. I think the other important piece of it is that technology has a huge role to play in things like employee safety, productivity, cost efficiency, differentiation, and all of those can contribute and align to corporate sustainability goals. And so I think what technology leaders can do, and they're not always at the table in these discussions yet, and this was the same thing that played out on digital, actually, back in the day when people were starting to do digital services. The technology leaders, the IT leaders at the time were not always at the table. And slowly over time, the IT leaders have become part and parcel of the digital conversation. And I think so too, and hopefully sooner rather than later, it will happen with the ESG conversation, is that we need to be able to manage data. We need to be able to manage the value of any life cycle or supply chain, operational performance, safety, et cetera. And so we need to embed that within whatever our objectives are, whether they're 2030, 2050, emissions guidelines. We need to be part of a target. And then we need to figure out what our organization and ourself is going to do in alignment with that target. And then technology is a key driver and enabler for that.
I've heard from a number of CIOs who are thinking that this particular domain, ESG, is as unique new space for them to show up and shine as COVID was. Because of exactly what you just said. It's all actually about technology sensing where we are at, technology used to connect the data to tell the story and make sure that we are, measuring and reporting and moving the needle forward, but also and that's all external to IT towards the business. But there is also an element of IT running a greener IT and thinking about impact that they have within their department. So there's a dual role almost. CIO running greener IT, green energy for data centers if they still run them, and so forth. Plus, of course, what they can do to the rest of the organization. That's really good. Yeah. So thanks for that. Next question. How do you keep yourself up to date with, technology trends, innovation, so that you feel that you stay on top of things and relevant?
I would say, yeah, I try, right? That's part of the job, is if you want to stay, I think, incumbent in the leadership role, You have to stay on top of like not only just trends, but also risks and what's happening at an operational level in organizations so that you can respond and adjust your own. I would say that I do what everybody that I know does, which is you read a lot. You keep abreast of, and now it's not just about tech, it's also about keeping abreast of current affairs too, right? You need to know what's happening economically. You need to know what's happening from a government policy standpoint as well, because that impacts what you're doing. I think the networks that we talk about is very important. So as and when you choose your networks, like that piece I talked about, like if I'm going to put my time here, I want to get something in return. I'm very strategic about, whether it's a speaking engagement or whether it's a networking opportunity. I am selective in the sense that I like to spend my time away from family when I'm doing those things where I'm investing in my own professional kind of maturity. I like to spend time where I know that I'm going to get something back. So I like to spend time networking with folks where we can learn from each other and share, divide and conquer all the stuff that it is. Not just with like-minded folks, but also diversifying. And so having like some CFOs in your network, some CHROs in your network, some sustainability officers in your network, and then attending, whether it's through one of the research firms or one of the, like consulting firms. There's so many opportunities to attend events, even like this one where you can have a couple of takeaways. And so keep having time for that, I think. I don't think I've done a course in a very long time, to be honest, not because I don't want to, it's because the time commitment is so difficult. And, I think that is a great opportunity too for folks who have the time to do it. I personally haven't had the time to do it. So for me, it's more been about learning on the job and taking advantage of where can I kill two birds with one stone? Like, can I attend this conference and do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things at the same time and then learn something while I'm there? Make time for like 1 or 2 events a month and pick them based on the substance of the content and the curation of the presenters, that type of thing, like just being very mindful about it.
So really, it's being deliberate about...
It's being deliberate and curating the right content for yourself.
So that's a second deliberate time commitment you need to do for yourself. One is about wellness. The other one is about external connectedness.
That's right.
That's excellent advice. Maybe one last question. Any recommendations on books that you felt were really impactful? Maybe podcasts, or people you might follow? Any advice of that nature to our audience?
It's old one, but this is the one I still give to most people, is just lean in for women, especially. Like I still tell them, if there's one book that you're going to read, and men as well. Actually, interestingly, and I had an experience at Finning where I coached a male leader through a recruitment process, where the male leader didn't want to bias the process and therefore was not encouraging one of the ready for promotion women on the team to apply. So he's like, I want it to be fair, so I'm not going to encourage her. And I said, you need to read Lean In. You need to go just understand the mindset of women. You need to understand the concept of imposter syndrome. You need to understand a certain of those things to be an effective male leader, because you might not need to give a nudge to the ready male, but you might need to give a nudge to the ready female to let her know that, give her a nod to say you're ready, because she will find reasons to not apply for that job. And so I know the book is old, and I know it, there's people who have opinions about it, whether, but read the first half of it just to get the basics of what women feel. And if we want to champion a more diverse and inclusive workforce, we need to be mindful of the barriers that hold people of color or people from different backgrounds or women behind. And so I think it's important for people to understand that.
Fantastic. And we're going to end on this note, Jessie. We are at time. I want to thank you very much. And I want to remind the audience to join us next week, same time, same channel, where I will host Paul Wagner, Paul is the ADM of Strategy and Transformation and our acting Chief Technology Officer for Canada. So he is with the federal government, with Treasury Board. So please register, come back, join us next week. Jessie, thank you so much again. This was wonderful. I've taken notes of some gold nuggets, and I very much look forward to staying connected with you.
Thanks, Dalibor. I had a really good time. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.